More arrests last night. This in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. This over the police shooting of Andrew Brown Jr. Last week, police issued multiple unlawful assembly warnings, but dozens of protesters remain out on the streets. This in violation of the city's curfew that was in effect at 8 p.m. And this kind of unrest has been common over the past year following very similar incidents across the nation, not just in North Carolina. One reporter went out on the street and found that some in our nation's capital feel that some of the violence and rioting is justified.
Change needs to be made, and if it's not getting done in the traditional avenues, then rioting is a good option.
If rioting is what gets people's attention, then I think that's necessary.
I think all violence is bad violence, but in the case when systems aren't responding to any other forms of change, I can understand people getting frustrated to the point that they need to take other avenues.
I think that there's a lot of systematic oppression within the United States, and that looting and rioting is very small in comparison to that.
All right, here now, the person behind the camera, that is Lisa Bennatan. She's a video journalist with the Daily Caller. Lisa, thanks so much for coming on. And just to make sure we're clear, that was a response there in our nation's capital, in D.C. How many folks did you speak to? Were you surprised to get this reaction? And was that reaction pretty much the majority of what you were hearing on camera?
That was definitely the majority of what I got from D.C. And what was interesting to me was to hear that reaction compared to what I heard from Brooklyn Center locals, where there had been several nights of unrest after the fatal shooting of Daunte Wright. And the message was widely different. It's interesting because the people in DC who think, they're fighting for the people in Brooklyn Center, the ones who are most impacted by riots, actually were not supportive of riots, telling me that there's a difference between protests and riots, and they felt that a lot of the riots happening in Brooklyn Center were on the cause of opportunistic people who are coming in from out of town, taking advantage of the opportunity, and were not actually the ones who lived in the community and have to deal with the consequences of it.
Another thing to analyze from the report, I mean, you can't help but to notice there were no persons of color answering the questions, but yet every one of them supported the rioting and played in that sound. Was that a surprising statistic from this interview?
Right, and it kind of just goes to show that somewhere along here, the message is getting lost in translation, and it's really not what these people in Brooklyn Center want. I spoke with people who live in the apartment complexes right outside the police department where all this unrest was occurring, and they were telling me, they understand the greater cause, but they're tired. I spoke with a teenager who lives in the apartment complex who actually had to be hospitalized the night prior after so much tear gas entered her home, and she has asthma. I spoke with another mother who has 3 children who were telling me they couldn't sleep and go to school. So it seems that message of, protests or riots are what these people want in Brooklyn Center is getting lost on its way to D.C.
When we bring that up, I want to play this next clip because you did speak with those as you were highlighting there in Minnesota, Brooklyn Center. Different perspective. Here's that.
A lot of the looting that happened in Ferguson, just like here, is only caused by opportunists.
When there's something like this goes on, the opportunistic people come out and they try to dehumanize this.
Those are two different, separate. We have protesters and then we have rioters.
We're human and we want to be treated with respect, so we got to come out here and show we are human and bring respect.
A lot of rioters are just kind of using the situation to just steal stuff, and I don't stand by that. That's not how it should be. That shouldn't be the norm. That shouldn't be happening at all. It's really gross.
So the obvious standout, again, you're speaking to a heavily minority community, and they have a completely different opinion about rioting, about violence, about unrest, and these are the folks that do strongly care about these issues that plague their communities. The folks that are essentially sipping lattes there walking by your camera in D.C. are all about it. It's just such a stark difference. You can't help but to notice it when you see your interview. I'm just curious of when you left this, what struck you the most?
Yeah, I mean, really what struck me the most is what we've talked about is just that major contrast, seeing the people who are actually impacted the most, hearing that they're really tired of this. The store right next to them is getting looted. The people that they know are being robbed, and they're having to watch rubber bullets and tear gas and pepper spray outside their windows every night. And you see children peering outside and looking at this destruction and violence that's happening. And so really it struck me that these people in DC might not be fully understanding the impact that it has on the actual people that live in these communities that are being so affected.
Well, you're seeing that because these are, in that community, these are the business owners. So these are the businesses that would be looted and windows being broken. And then, and you hear about the tear gas situation. That's what happens when you've escalated the violence, the rioting in the community. Now policing has to escalate. And again, the situation continues to get worse. You see people arrested, just like what you're watching in Elizabeth City. And it's great to get the perspective of the thoughts of what's happening in that community, and then also go into the nation's capital and seeing, again, it's how that message is portrayed. Lisa Bennatan, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your interviews with us. We do appreciate that.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm Rob Finnerty. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please join the conversation in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, too. Hit the bell icon to be alerted to breaking news. And remember, there's a whole lot more on Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news network. Newsmax TV, we're real news for real people.